Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. For months now, especially during the playoffs here, it has been a very large media conversation of who is the best player on the Celtics. It feels like at this point, with the Celtics up 3-0, we have sort of put those narratives to some degree to rest now that the Celtics seem to be at least on the brink, or they are on the brink of a championship. Feels like it is going to head that direction. And it is Jaylen Brown who has emerged as the finals MVP favorite. I don't think that that's necessarily indicative of who the best player on the Celtics is, but an extremely well-deserved movement where Jaylen Brown was clowned a lot of the offseason, throughout a lot of the regular season, after he became the highest paid player in NBA history after signing his Supermax extension with the Celtics. And the Celtics were very heavily criticized for giving out that type of contract based off of the way that the seasons have played out in recent years of making these deep postseason runs. But it seemed like there has been just some sort of blocker in the way. And now we've seen the Celtics go, I believe it's now up to 13-2 in the postseason. They are 79-20 on the playoffs as a whole. They have a chance to become one of the only teams in NBA history to win 80 games and have 20 losses or less. 6 teams are a part of that category. It's the 1996 Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan, 97 as well. The 2017 Golden State Warriors, the 1986 Boston Celtics, 1987 Los Angeles Lakers, and the 2015 Golden State Warriors. So some of the best teams in NBA history have been able to reach this mark of 80 plus wins and 20 or less losses. And the Celtics, it seems like the biggest thing, because ultimately when you look at who is playing these impactful minutes for the Celtics on the court, for the most part, there really isn't all too much of a difference of the rotation players playing in these games this season in comparison to last, where Jrue Holiday, absolutely a massive get for them. But outside of that, Kristaps Porzingis was as well, but he has played in minimal minutes throughout this postseason, and I don't believe that the Celtics they're definitely not up 3-0 if Porzingis doesn't play in these first couple games, but he has missed about half of the Celtics postseason games so far this year. It's been a ton of the internal improvement from this Celtics organization, and I believe in large part it is Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum who have learned to not just coexist and not necessarily worry about who is the alpha and who's the true number one. It's just about getting the job done. They have been on the doorstep of winning a championship for a number of years now, and they are currently at a point where it seems like they are willing to sort of put the narratives aside and just focus on winning now. Now, I'm sure it's going to be a conversation from here on out. Once you get the one championship, we'll see whether or not Jaylen Brown would like to become a bigger star. Jason Tatum, at least for marketability nationally and I would say in Massachusetts, is seen as the true number one. But if Jaylen Brown gets the finals MVP here, I have a hard time imagining that he's going to be too upset being the highest paid player in the NBA. That being said, Jason Tatum's probably going to surpass him this offseason. But I think that dynamic will be interesting to see how it plays out over time. But Jaylen has just been on an absolute heater for the Celtics, and it goes back to winning the Eastern Conference Finals MVP, where that one was definitely a little bit of a debate. This one, I think that ultimately with Jaylen Brown, because of some of the inconsistencies with scoring, it makes sense that he is going to be favored over Jason Tatum. But, both of them have been tremendous. And again, the Tatum shooting is something that is absolutely something you can point to, which is probably what favors Jaylen Brown in this instance. Now, a minus 280 favorite on DraftKings, Jason Tatum at plus 250. This was Jason Tatum's, you could say, award to lose to some degree. He's been the favorite for at least since the conference finals, and we even had the finals matchup set. And headed into the series as well, Jason Tatum was the odds-on favorite, but it's now shifted in favor of Jaylen Brown, who this series has been averaging 24 points per game on 55-25% shooting splits. The threes haven't necessarily been there for him, but we're also seeing him average 5.7 assists, something that has not necessarily been a massive part of his game. And if you're talking about the future outlook of this Celtics team, something that's really interesting, because Tatum has done a phenomenal job over the course of the past couple years. Really, if you want to look back to 2022 and that final series, for as bad as it was for Tatum, really struggled with turnovers, that's when we did see him at least start to understand a little bit more, making the right plays at the right time in terms of his facilitating and his playmaking. Now, obviously, it was very clunky then, and it's been a growing process since then, where that's why I don't believe he did play definitively bad in these first couple of games, because he was providing a lot of extra stuff outside of the scoring. But Jaylen Brown is starting to show off that ability to have a little bit of a better IQ passing the ball as well. And ultimately, this Celtics team is just built by committee. It's not like it is the traditional one player takes over a game and leads his team to victory. It's not the LeBron James model, but it is a little bit of that maybe. And even when you look at the 2017-18 Warriors, it was Kevin Durant who time after time was who the Celtics went to, or the Warriors, that is, went to take the big shot. The threes that he hit over LeBron in back-to-back years in the finals are sort of those staple moments. Steph Curry didn't necessarily have that. But by no means does that say that Steph Curry wasn't an invaluable piece to that Warriors team, because it changes the way that they play, and it changes the way that other teams can play defense against them. So, making these comparisons, obviously I'm not saying the Celtics are on that same level of the Warriors necessarily. They still have a lot of proving to do, and that's something that we're going to be touching on in the next segment as well. But just generally speaking here, the Celtics are at a point where, from a regular season perspective, this has been one of the best runs in recent history. Now, you can point to who they played in the postseason and say wasn't quite as strong. Absolutely, I understand that, which is why I don't believe they are going to be put in these all-time conversations just yet. But if you are just looking at what they were able to do this year, how they were constructed to do so, it's because they have two number one options essentially in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And ultimately, if Brown wins this award, I don't think it is a definitive lock necessarily just yet, but it does feel like Brown is a little bit of the overwhelming favorite here, and that's going to be the case. It is extremely deserving. By no means is it a detriment to Jason Tatum, but it's just a sort of statement on this Celtics roster construction as a whole. But I want to talk more on how the Celtics sort of got to this point, and again, that developing maturity, as well as the idea of what is it going to take, because let's say they win on Friday, they go 80-20 on the season, they join one of 7 teams to win at least 80 games, and have 20 or less losses, that it still doesn't feel like they are going to be viewed in the same light of those other all-time teams. So we're going to be diving into what it will take for the Celtics to change that, considering the fact that this season there really isn't much else that they can currently do. But we're going to be answering all of those questions. First, though, a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.